It's time for Bourbon with Friends, the bourbon podcast that never takes itself too seriously. Pull up a chair, grab a glass, and remember, a bourbon with friends can change the world. Here we go.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Bourbon with Friends. Myself, Adrian, and Martin are here to talk about whiskeys from around the world and if a Bourbon with Friends can change the world. How are you guys doing today?
Good, man. How about you guys? What's going on?
Doing awesome.
It's hot as hell out.
It is hot.
Like really fucking hot. Annoyingly hot, really.
Yeah.
I don't like the thing is we'll say this now and then the winter comes around and then you're just like, it's cold as fuck out right now. I fucking hate this. Bring on 90-degree weather. But I was thinking too, like we're all whiskey drinkers, obviously, and we typically drink whiskey straight. That's sort of what it is, but can't really do. I mean, you can do it, and I have done it, and I will do it in 90-degree weather at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. But you guys are probably far more versed than I am at this because I'm very much a newbie in the cocktail world. Adrian, you've been doing a whole bunch of cool shit lately. Any cool cocktails you guys have had lately?
Gosh, you're putting me on the spot, Martin.
I know.
So we make a cocktail at Edwin Co. It's called Tongue Tied, and it has a Thai theme, and it's kind of like a dinner in a glass. It's pretty interesting, but
It's like super sweet though.
yeah, it has rum in it too.
Oh, that's odd. Brian?
Yeah.
I made a rum hot shot last night,
Okay.
and that was delicious. Actually helped me feel a little bit better, and went to bed and woke up super early. So I was able to go on my morning run.
All because of rum.
All because of rum. The running of rum.
Yeah, which is odd, because we have our guests today. You want to bring them on in. We have Jordan Morris and Turner Wathen, Rolling Fork. What's going on, guys?
Hey
Hi, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're welcome.
What's going down?
So I did a little bit of reading about you guys, and I think the one thing that I found interesting was you guys met through your wives, and the first thing I thought was, do they take any credit for that?
They take a lot of credit. Now, do they care? Is entirely different. But yeah, I mean, they introduced us. They were working together, and this is 2012. I was trying to do something terribly, and Jordan was writing for the Whiskey Wash, and they were like, "You guys should hang out." And we're like, "No." And they're like, "No, we're going to make you all hang out." And so they put us in a room together, and that started that. And then we started to have group text messages where Jordan and I would just blow the text message up with wildly inappropriate things. And so they're like, you know what? You two clearly are made for each other, and we're going to go. They did their job. They did their job. They washed their hands with it, and they
Walked away.
So Turner, the first time I met you, you had like samples of vodka or some shit, and I was like, "Oh my god, this guy's gonna start a vodka company. I fucking hate this guy."
That would be my exact thoughts. Like,
And I was at his house, so it was like, "Oh, cool." He's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do a vodka." I was like, I can't tell him how much I hate that idea because I'm at his house. I get thrown out. So I was like, "Oh, that sounds like a great idea."
We never ended up doing any vodka.
We did not do a vodka. No.
is that ever going to happen though? Just even as a joke at this point.
We do like puns, so that's
We would be dumb enough to put an entire product on the market just as a joke.
Just as a joke. Yeah. You're like, why'd you do it? Like, well, that's a really long story. I can tell you.
Somebody put me up to it.
Yeah, it's a long story, but really actually pretty fucking short. Well, so that intro was obviously kind of purposeful in a lot of ways. I got into rum not too terribly long ago. I have a friend that's been trying to get me into rum for a long time. My ideal rum was very different than I think what it actually is. I find that, back in the day, it was your you're more like your spice rum, your kind of stuff that you put in like in a cocktail or something like that. But it opened up an incredible world for me when he sent me a lot of samples of some really crazy stuff, including some of your own prior to when we talked about having you guys on. But what I found is that it's really such a crazy spirit that touches a big part of like a lot of cultures. It's pretty crazy. And it's actually translating a bunch of different styles, whether it's agricole, or it's that really just that funky high ester stuff that comes out of Jamaica, which is oddly enough turned out to be my favorite. Fucking love it.
It's our favorite.
It really is. Like I not at first. At first I was like, I can't do this. But as I got into it, I found that it was something that I really gravitated to as far as complexity and everything like that. But I guess, can you tell us kind of where you find yourselves and like where you find yourselves in that kind of that whole like background of everything, like in that whole landscape? Where do you see your guys' self as positioned as?
I'll be short, then I'll flip it to Jordan. Clearly, on the back label used to always say, and it will always stay that way, but we're independent bottlers. We never had distillery money. And, so in 2012 to 15, while we were doing distillation runs out of my garage, we would play with sorghum, which is native to Kentucky. And then we started playing with molasses. Now, from a breaking down a starch to a sugar to a convertible alcohol, grain is a lot longer to work with than sugar, because you just have sugar, you skip the starch part. So there's an expedite of the process that saves you time from a home distiller perspective. But Jordan, why did we get into rum?
So the year was, what was it, Turner, 2016?
Mm-hmm.
Turner was like, after his vodka idea, he was like, we should start a whiskey company. I was like, that's a terrible idea.
Well, Jordan, we were working on a whiskey company in 2014.
Yeah, but I was like, it's played out, like, does the world need another independent bottler, bottling MGP? Smooth Ambler is already doing a great job at it. So is High West. Nobody needs us. Clearly, I was wrong. Everyone else has gotten filthy rich off of bottling MGP since then. So, I like to say that it was my idea to keep us poor. I pat myself on the back for that on a regular basis. But at the time, we thought that rum was very not represented in the U.S., when we started. I think now there's more notoriety there. Foursquare bottlings come in, Hampton is distributed. There's a couple independent bottlers that started after us that, do some nice bottlings as well. But at the time we started, it was kind of unheard of to be a rum independent bottler in the U.S. There were a few in Europe, Bouillet being probably the most famous. But we just thought that rum, there wasn't much shelf space for it. Most people didn't know about it. Everyone had a bad experience with Captain Morgan's in college, and thought, well, rum sucks. Mm-hmm. Captain Morgan's is, I don't know, about the equivalent of doing a Fireball and saying you hate whiskey, right? Or saying you hate bourbon, actually. There's a nice equivalent as if because, Captain Morgan's is a flavored rum. Yeah. So it's all the additives in it that drive its flavor. And, big surprise, people don't do well with a lot of that on a bad college night with, mixed with Dr. Pepper. But
I didn't. So
yeah, no one does. What was the Red Stag? That was
Red Stag.
That was a bad one from college too. Ooh. Yeah. So we noticed that people were catching on to like high-end spirits at the time. Yeah. Right. Japanese whiskey, Scotch, bourbon, clearly. A little bit of rye, Rye has always been mildly popular. People think it's more popular than it is, but it's really not that popular, but we like to talk about it. But, there wasn't much representation of rum, which kind of fits in a lot of the same categories. You can get, really well crafted, really well aged with, very historic distilleries making it unique, proper. Like, I would say there's more variety in it than there is in bourbon, for example. Yeah. You have all these different jurisdictions that, due to history, have developed their own kind of methods of making it. You've got the Dunder Pits of Jamaica. You've, of course, got fresh cane juice rums coming out of Brazil as cachaça, as well as a lot of the French islands as agricole. You know, and then there's some newer islands that also put their own spin on it. You have the kind of historical delineation from pot, you know, mostly starting at pot still and then moving over to column still over time, as everyone else did in distillation. But there's just a lot of variety out there. There's a lot of history. There's, quite frankly, a lot of freaking good rum in the world, and none of it was making it here. You would go on, what was it, Master of Malt, and pay, you know, $150 to ship 2 bottles. You would pay just as much for the shipping as you did for the rum.
Yep.
And so at some point we were just like, well, we really like this stuff and no one else is doing it, so we should do it. That was also a terrible idea. Importing stuff is not fun at all, but that was kind of the premise. Is we just really liked rum and no one else was doing it, and we thought we'd rather, you know, offer something different to the market than just more MGP.
Exactly. And I think you sort of answered my next question, but at the same time, I think there's a part of it that kind of got sparked from that because, I mean, clearly I, as a consumer of alcohol, didn't understand rum. And I feel like that's pretty prevalent. I feel like that's something that not a lot of people do. I mean, you even looking at it as like a sipping spirit, that's Scotch, that's bourbon, that's even tequila at this point. There's people that I know that have moved into just sipping tequila, which I find interesting. Do you think it is kind of like, I mean, obviously people who are, you know, creating these brands like you all and people who are kind of pushing it, who are casual fans, do you think there's also even like a responsibility of just like bartenders who can be like to introduce people to spirits like that a little bit?
Okay, I'll start. No.
Okay.
There's not. Because poor rum production is economically incentivized by the U.S. government through the cover-over taxes. So if you're going to start from the top, they would prefer misinformation and disinformation over education and quality.
Yeah.
So if you are going to start at the very top and they want that, how can I tell a bartender it's your responsibility to fix this? Now, it helps that the cost of a cocktail is risen. So then the consumer that's going to spend what was an $8 cocktail, now they're paying $12 to $15, they're going to expect higher ingredients. Mm-hmm. So all ships can float. And yes, education is prevalent to what we do. Education is prevalent to what the spirits community, I think, as a whole really tries to drive, that are really passionate about this. Mm-hmm. But at the top of it, they would prefer you to just think of rum as where you go to get an all-inclusive drink at an all-inclusive resort and to have shitty marketing.
Yeah.
So pause. Do you guys know what Turner's talking about with the cover over tax?
Yeah,
this is his new soapbox he gets up and
okay.
about. So yeah, he sometimes forgets to give the context. But for listeners, Matt Petrick, Cocktail Wonk, has written a great article as well as it's a chapter in his book. It's an extremely interesting economic incentive for the USVI in Puerto Rico to make as much rum as possible. The more rum they make, the more tax dollars they get back. Mm. And so those jurisdictions, so if you're Puerto Rico, you go to Bacardi and you say, what do you need? You need to make more rum so I can get more tax dollars back. You tell me what you need. And if you're Bacardi and you're a factory, you look around and you say, I can use some molasses. I don't want to pay for that. I don't want, I need marketing dollars. I need this, that, and the other. And it's the same in USVI, which is, Diageo, Captain Morgan's. They are subsidized by the local governments to produce. It's not a quality thing. It's a volume thing. So, free market. If someone's paying you to make the most that you absolutely can, you're going to run the most efficient process to make the most volume to get the most money. So what Turner's saying is it gets difficult when you're someone like us or even, small well-regarded distilleries in other countries because they're not getting those subsidies. And in fact, it's our federal excise tax dollars that are what's funding the USVI in Puerto Rico. So, for example, if you're Foursquare, probably the most famous rum distillery in the world, and every bottle you ship to the United States, the federal excise tax you pay on that is actually being spread between Puerto Rico and USVI, which those governments are then using it to subsidize your competition. And your competition, of course, isn't playing the quality game or anything like that. They're playing the volume game. So that can be very frustrating for a lot of rum producers.
So the
For
more
us-
quality rum that's imported into the U.S., the more money we give to make bad rum.
Not bad rum, just mass production rum. Make
Yes.
the most you possibly can. You're not incentivized to age it. You're not incentivized to, like focus on quality or materials. You're incentivized to make a spirit distilled from sugarcane or a sugarcane byproduct.
Well,
Run
and
it up a
it's-
column still as fast as you can, 24/7. That's what you're incentivized to do.
It's very interesting, but like this is what killed the tiki movement that was so prevalent in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. This is why tiki died off. You couldn't keep up, and the Bacardi family instituted or negotiated these terms back in the early 50s, 1950s. Don't quote me on that, but that's a rough, pretty safe number. And if you think about, tiki was it was extraordinarily popular in small pockets of U.S. economies where you could have beach drinks, and it did have its place, and we killed it. Now it's awesome that people are bringing it back. It would be nice if those said people had a little bit of help.
But anyways.
Yes. Well, sorry.
That's
sorry.
Turner's soapbox he's been ranting on about taxes. He's always complaining about some form of taxes, which I'm like, I think over time Turner's becoming more and more libertarian. That's what I figured out. But so on your question about bartenders, I think it has to be a group effort, right? Bartenders are incentivized to make cocktails and make money, and I totally understand that. Now there are rum specialty bars springing up, and I do think that's a huge help. Right. Yeah. Because that bar isn't making one or two rum cocktails and calling it a night. Right. They're not looking at what's the best, best bang for the buck. They're offering a variety. Yeah. If you think about, kind of definitely one of the best and probably older running ones now, like Smuggler's Cove in San Francisco.
Yes.
There are those springing up like in large cities. And that is extremely helpful. Right. Because you go to a nice bar, you get the nice ambiance and experience, and you open this menu. And there's a couple hundred rums available for someone who, walking in off the street thinks, the rum is rum, and they walk in and see a few hundred available. They're like, oh, wait a minute. There's probably something I don't know about rum if there's 300 of them available. I think that's a huge help. Clearly, a lot of writers write about rum. It's actually a huge market in Europe. So you see a lot of great coverage on rum and the smaller distilleries, and the history of it from European websites. It's very popular there. But in the U.S., I think, too, the big push of bourbon and people knowing more. I mean, everyone can tell you about the tier level in the warehouse and the yeast strain of Four Roses, right?
Right.
Yeah.
10 years ago, no one, or 15 years ago, no one knew that. The casual drinker walked in and said Four Roses, and they got Four Roses yellow label, and that was it, if it was even available, right? And now, I mean, relatively, casual drinkers like, well, did you know Four Roses has 10 recipes? And there's a high rye mash bill and a lower rye, and there's 5 different yeast strains, and it's like, we have very informed drinkers now.
Yes,
certain demographics, and those people are the same people that will seek out knowledge on whatever they drink, whether it's cognac, Armagnac, rum, tequila, whichever way they go. They're generally the population that says, I want to know more about this. Yeah. Right. And so I think the websites help. I think the educated enthusiast helps. The people that'll rattle off every cooperage, within a 100-mile radius and tell you how their barrels are different. Those are the people that are going to do the homework. They're going to find the websites, read the books, go to a rum bar and ask questions.
It is. No, and I mean, I think that is, again, how I found my way into it. I had a friend who kept talking about it. There's a rum bar in Chicago called Sparrow. But they have a great menu. And it took them overhearing me saying something about a Hampton that I was just like, do you want to try it on its own instead of in the cocktail? And I was like, sure. Tried it. Yeah. Wasn't used to it yet. But that still piqued my interest. I'm like, but that doesn't turn me off as someone who, that's like, well, I want to figure this one out. And I think that is what I've been seeing in our community, even like in the whiskey community, is that kind of notion of I'm not going to be done here, because I could have said that on a peated whiskey from Scotland that I tried one time and I hated it. Now I love it. I think that's the interesting about rum, is it doesn't turn them off. It just kind of perplexes them, really. And then they want to chase that and figure out how they can enjoy it. So that's kind of where I was thinking of, just from that bartenders. But I do get what you mean. It does take a village to really push a product that is not the norm within the same kind of way that bourbon and Scotch and even tequila, mezcal has become.
I think the high end drinker too. If you look at like the trends in the U.S. and what spirits are growing, actually premium rum is growing.
Yeah.
So the people that are seeking out really like quality spirits, it's gaining interest there. Much like you guys have probably seen the interested pockets of Armagnac.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's the same people. It's the people that will also, go to great lengths to understand bourbon. They're now just applying that passion and that curiosity elsewhere. And that's great for us because, you guys tried our rums. We don't exactly sell, flavored rum at 80 proof. We sell cask strength rums by the cask. So, it's great for us that I would actually credit bourbon for it. Bourbon is the reason we have such a curious and informed drinking base now, that those are our customers too.
I would agree with that, just simply based on the fact that obviously I drank the ethereal Captain Morgan, right, way back. And then I found bourbon and got excited about that and interested in that, and beginning to learn that many other spirits are very much like that and very different and broad, and you can learn about them. And it was very exciting for me to try these.
We started to try and broker rum around the end of 2013, 2014. We started working on seeing what we could get. And the first 2 years there was the same conversation. We want single country of origin, single distillery, single distillation year, no multi-year blend. And they'd be like, yeah. And what I got for you is a small 3 different producer blend from 3 different countries. It does have a little bit of color and caramel, but it tastes like El Dorado 12 year. It's like, nowhere in our conversation did we ask for that. But that was, in terms of high-end, well-crafted spirits in the brokered and sourced market, that's what people would sell us. We never bought it. We kept fighting until we got to what we wanted. But in terms of just a misunderstanding, it started at the sales point of the wholesaler and the buyer. It wasn't even.
What Turner's pointing out is it's a little bit of this chicken and egg scenario in rum, right? Because there wasn't really high-end rum available in the U.S. If you're a distributor and a retailer that studies trends, as you should, you're like, well, high-end rum doesn't sell because look at the numbers. They're terrible, right? So I'm not going to buy any high-end rum to put on my shelves. I'm going to focus on whiskey and tequila, which is going like this. The comedy of it was, it wasn't selling because there was none available, right? And so when there's none to sell, of course, the numbers are going to be flat because it's always going to be zero. The rum, I think, and that really helped kind of start turning the wheel a little bit and showing that no, actually this premium category does sell and those people are interested, would probably be Foursquare, right? When they started doing their exceptional cask and their vintages, so 2005, 2007, 2008, 2009, that's when people that, again, like high-end spirits, started seeing that there was a few retailers taking a chance on it, and there would be people driving from states over or having friends go buy it and ship it to them. And that's when you started to see actual growth in the market because it was actually available.
So what made you guys decide to, sorry, go ahead, Brian.
No, that's all you. Ladies first.
What made you guys decide to work with Starlight?
It was so we wandered. We were, the brand without a home for the first 5 years, Turner?
5 years we're at 4 different Kentucky facilities.
Yeah, so we were definitely a wandering outfit. We were viewed as not a threat in whiskey, so we were often, welcomed because like, oh, you guys are making rum. I'm not worried about you. I'm a whiskey distillery, right? But the way we eventually got connected with Starlight was actually trading barrels. So, and this is the funny one I tell people all the time. There are more people interested in our empty barrels than there are interested in the full barrels, right? Like I at least once a week, I have a whiskey company ask me what I'm doing with my empty barrels. Because these would be, the freshest rum barrels in the United States. Any other rum barrel you're going to get is probably dumped in the Caribbean, loaded into a steel container, sits at a port for X amount of time, burning in the sun. Like, you're not going to get a fresh barrel. It's going to be dried out. At best dried out, at worst, like beyond use.
Yeah.
Whereas with us, I've had some whiskey companies have used our barrels and it's like, hello, I dumped it today. Would you like to come and get it? And it's filled that afternoon. And that's actually how we got plugged in with Starlight. Is I was there with Blake Reber. I'd never been there, so I was just visiting with him. He was doing a barrel pick, and they were talking about trying to get rum barrels. And I was like, I think I could probably help with that. I've got a lot of empty rum barrels, but what I need are whiskey barrels. That's what I put rum in. And so we kind of started just trading back and forth. And, over about a year period, we realized it would be a lot easier to trade back and forth if we were just in the same facility. So, now we use a decent amount of their barrels, as wouldn't be surprised to people to find out. So, for example, our Amberana release from last year was Amberana casks they had used. And they then released a rum Amberana release that was the same barrel after we had used it for rum. We've also used a lot of their ex-bourbon barrels. And, their rye finish, bourbon, or their rum finish, rye, and bourbon are mostly our barrels.
Oh, did he freeze? Did everybody freeze?
I hope not.
We all back?
Yeah.
All right.
I think we've been here. So based off of your answer for that, that's absolutely phenomenal. You guys are going with Starlight and trying to push everything forwards in the right direction, especially with sharing barrels and having all that relationship to build and grow your company the best way you guys think it's possible. Random question. What's your favorite pairing with rum? Food, spirits, other nature's things.
That's an interesting question.
That was a good question.
All right. So do you want to, I have a few, I like to, so first of all, like spirits wise, Boulevardiers. Instead of doing a straight whiskey, I do a split base. So half rum, half bourbon. All it does is makes it a little sweeter, right? So you're going to balance out the Campari a little more than straight bourbon. It also lightens it up a bit. So I like a split base Boulevardier. Let's see here, food wise, a lot of our rums are very similar to bourbon, right? They have a lot of cask driven flavor. So clearly you go down your path of like steak or anything like that. Steak and rum is delightful. And then on the dessert side, I like freaking rum and ice cream. So
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Appetizers wise, I like oysters. They're inherently salty. And so it kind of balances out with some of the saltiness that you can get with the brine. I think it generally pairs better with saltier foods on the appetizer side. Cocktail wise, we do a lot of weird stuff. I've done a play off an old fashioned where I took some older age Jamaican and did old fashioned, but I also cut it with Armagnac. That turned out really well. I mean, both of those are inherently a little bit sweeter, much like the way that one's designed.
Have you guys ever done a brown derby cocktail? Grapefruit juice, honey. It's traditionally a bourbon cocktail, but actually our Heart of Gold we sent you guys does really well in a brown derby riff. It works well with citruses, so grapefruit juice or something like that. Yeah, it's really refreshing.
Okay.
Definitely one of my favorites for like the summer, when it's freaking hot as shit outside.
Yeah.
My bartenders just changed our recipes at our distillery to that. So
Gotcha.
I believe but we're using our brandy.
Okay. Yeah.
So
I mean, I like a barrel aged rum in it. Yeah.
Rum really does pair well with fish. It does.
Okay.
Usually I just pair my rum with misery, right?
Yeah.
So
it's the best pairing.
Yeah.
It's easier,
It is.
It's funny too, because I on top of whiskey, on top of taking on rum now, I also decided, I'm like, oh, let me start smoking cigars as well, because why not have another fucking
expensive hobby?
Yeah.
Why not? Like, why not?
Yeah.
I found that I didn't always love pairings of whiskey and cigars, but I am yet to find a rum that doesn't go like amazing with cigars. Like every single one just seems to do well with it that I've had so far. With whiskey, I'm like, sometimes it just dries out like the palate too much. Sometimes it's like the tannin, there's just too much tannic going on in there that I'm just like, it's just not going right. But every rum so far has been really excellent. So that's something
we have a cigar group that actually picks about a barrel a year from us of rum, and then they match it with so then they always have a cigar that they recommend the pairing with.
That's awesome.
So,
yeah, that's really cool.
Jordan and I have yet to get into cigars. Everyone asks us, and we're like, sorry,
it starts off thinking that it's gonna be like, oh well, you know what? It's $15 a stick sometimes. If you really want to get expensive on it, you can get some more expensive ones. You can get really good stuff. But then you forget that you're buying 4 or 5 sometimes at a time, and then that lasts for about a week, and then you start over the next week. And then you're like, oh, well, I can do one more cigar today. So then it turns into this whole thing where you're almost spending as much as you would on a bottle per week. So then it's not as cheap of a hobby as I once thought. And then of course any accessory that you want to go with it or anything you want to do, or going to like cigar bars and cigar lounges and things like that. Yeah, it's not. But I mean, I think it's great to kind of just check out new things. And like I said, the whole reason why I wanted to try a rum, which is interesting that you said about Starlight. And the way that you are the Rise, because I'm a huge fan of the Rise. I think that's, to me, maybe one of my favorite Rise. It's just really kind of an interesting way to expand your palate. Be like, well, I know I've had a whiskey with rum in it. I'm like, but I know nothing about rum. So I want to know where I can separate those notes that I'm getting. What's coming from the rye, what's coming from the rum. And I think when you said Armagnac, that is one. Something that like people are starting to notice Armagnac, and I wonder if that is from finishings. Like, it's like, well, I know that I got an Armagnac finished, bourbon or Scotch. Like now I want to know what I'm getting from that, or cognac or something like that. So yeah, it's interesting to try to discover a little bit more of the flavors you're finding in something, rather than just being like, well, I've got this finished in so and so, and it tastes really good. I want to know why it tastes really good.
So that was a very long ramble, Martin. Thank you for that.
It's what I do.
Hey, it's at least an intelligent ramble compared to some of our lives that we do. So want to get into you guys' spirits. You guys sent us an 11-year-old from El Salvador.
Yes.
You've got another one from Barbados, and then the Heart of Gold. Can you go into these spirits, explain them to everybody that's out there that we have in front of us?
I'll start with the Heart of Gold. The Heart of Gold, besides being a great fucking name, right?
It's really good.
Great name.
So gold rum, if you read a lot of the rum classifications, there's like unaged rum or silver rum. It can be aged and then the color's filtered out, right? So some people have a 1, 2, or 3-year-old rum that they've filtered the color out in post-aging. But there's also silver rum that's just unaged. Gold rum is that category above where it's had some time in a barrel, right? It's not now. A lot of people confuse dark rum with gold rum. Dark rum is when you actually add caramelized molasses to it to make it dark, right? To make it like that black color. And of course, adding the molasses adds a lot of sugar. So, dark rum is totally different than gold rum. Gold rum is just barrel aging to change the color. In rum, like in whiskey, I'm sure you guys have had White Dog as well as young whiskey. And I mean, general consensus, it tastes a little rough. The interesting thing on rum is a lot of the flavor in rum is driven by the fermentation. That's where you whereas in whiskey, you're really chasing that barrel profile. and you're using the barrel to clean up some of the rough edges of your whiskey. And rum, you start with a fermentation, and that's where you're trying to get your flavor. You're using, the Jamaicans use dunder, muck, cane vinegar, as well as fermentation strategies and wild yeast to get flavor into the wash before they distill it. And then distillation becomes preserving that flavor, right? Keeping some of those good flavors, of course, filtering out some of the shit flavors. And even in the aging process, there's a bit of a balance between you have a barrel that's charred, that's charcoal. Charcoal filters things. So part of the game of rum is also balancing aging so that you don't age out the flavors that you enjoy in rum. And so the Heart of Gold that we have here is like, it's a blend of 1 to 4 year old rums, so lightly aged. So it has the color, it has a little bit of filtration, but really a lot of the flavor is driven by the rum, not the barrel. So we designed that one for cocktails. 101 proof. A lot of bartenders, one of my knocks on a lot of the kind of cocktail level rums available in the same price range as this is they're very underproof for what, the American consumer expects in a cocktail now. We like, at least for me and, the bourbon drinking crowd of Louisville, Kentucky, where we live, we like spirits forward cocktails. And the challenge with using an 80 proof rum in a cocktail is that it's very hard to make a spirit forward cocktail when you're dealing with 40% alcohol. 100, 101 to me is kind of the sweet spot for, making a solid cocktail where the alcohol is still present as well as, the ingredients you've mixed in are present, but not dominating. You go over 101, I love cask strength cocktails as well, but that's when you get into the range of here's the spirit and then, the ingredients you're kind of chasing after. So it really depends on the cocktail, but we designed this one to hopefully hit the right balance, especially for rum cocktails. So it does really well with citrus. So lemon juice driven, lime juice, grapefruit juice, something like that is, like I mentioned, the brown derby is a really nice one. Daiquiris, clearly. And then we also featured kind of our favorite two jurisdictions, which is Jamaica, Barbados. So the Barbados is a rum distilled by Foursquare Distillery. It's aged by them for 3 years, and then we get it and we age it for a year at Starlight Distillery. And then the Jamaicans in there is a Clarendon Column rum, which is pretty clean rum. We put that in a heavy toasted barrel to really get barrel flavor. And then we have 2 pot still rums from Worthy Park in there, a 1 year and a 4 year.
Oh, no kidding.
So what's funny about this is we brought all the spirits in house and then we aged them and then blend them. We didn't just go out and buy a blend. But we probably will end up having to just to save our money and save our asses because this is an expensive method to make a $30 product. But when we blend it all together, I tried it and I was like, oh, this is great. We did it, Jordan. We hit a really well-balanced Jamaican forward cocktail proof product that I think is going to be awesome. And Jordan tried it and he was like, I hate it. It's not funky enough. It needs to be bolder. And then we went to a bar that night that is a very well-established cocktail bar. And the bartenders were just like, whoa, this is pretty funky. See, I told you, Jordan. Jordan's like, I don't care. I want it better.
So my challenge is I always want to make rums that I want to drink.
Yeah.
Right.
Not what yeah.
Well, I did finally concede that we actually made what we set out to make, which was an extremely well-balanced, approachable cocktail rum. Martin, you mentioned Hampton. If I were making it for myself, it would be much heavier on the ester and funk scale.
Yeah.
And we may do one, I've already told Turn, I was like, I'm going to do one of those in the future, but I understand the point of this rum, right? And the point of this one was balanced. You get some of the Jamaican funk kind of in the sweet spot for cocktails. And I think we did that really well. And the label's pretty fucking sick. So,
yes, it is. Like I mentioned, I had learned about this one prior to getting the opportunity to try it, and I am glad that I built up a kind of a back catalog of this type of rum before I jumped into it. But it's. I mean, I've been drinking this neat for the last week since I got it out. It's just fucking fantastic.
It's actually a really nice rum for summer because it has a little bit of that fruity tropical vibe to it.
Those like peat, like I always get those peach rings, like those the little gummy peach ring things, like that is like the main note with like, it's just I always get that out of these kind of like higher, like funkier, highester rums, and it's like it's become like a flavor that I just chase whenever I get into rums and when I'm searching certain ones out. It's fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah.
So moving on to the El Salvador rum, this was our first foray into really experimental barrel aging. And it was 2018 that we wanted to really work on or just play with the finishing process where we used a variety of barrels across wine and booze to see the effects of barrel maturation. And so we had some port casks and sherry casks, as well as rye and Woodford double oak barrels. And when we went out to source the rum, we were looking at some Jamaican, we're looking at some Trinidad, but there was this El Salvador rum that was not layered. It was just a vanilla bomb. It just had a huge vanilla note. It was, I think, 9 or 10 years of age when we were considering it.
It was 10.
It was 10, but it had no color and really no big body and really no finish. Like it was all one singular note. And we thought that would be the most, interesting to see the outcome on. And so we picked the El Salvador because it was so linearly basic with really no depth. And we took about, I don't know, a couple of 1,000 liters worth and divided it up between port, rye, sherry, and bourbon casks. And wrote it for about 23 months almost. And then I kept annoying Jordan with how we are going to blend this and what blend ratios we should look at. He's like, shut up. We're just going to blend it all and just do it.
Turner kept sending me these ratios, and I was like, have you just tried fucking blending it all together? That's really good. Like, that's a lot easier, like. He's like, well, I really like barrel 7 with barrel 12. I was like, have you tried just all of them? Because, that's not rocket science there, And so, yeah. He finally did it. And I was like, yeah, you're right. This is really good. The challenge with the blend was really the sherry casks were super strong after almost 2 years. A lot of people are used to sherry casks for their whiskey. But, rum is a more delicate spirit. So, how I said, like our heart of gold, we wanted the rum to show through. Like when you put a very light bodied rum into a fresh sherry cask, you pretty much nuke the flavor of the rum, right? I mean, it is all sherry driven, especially after 2 years. So thankfully we didn't use all sherry casks, or you guys would just be drinking a high ABV version of sherry, I guess. But ironically, as we shopped it around, we had a few of the single barrels, and all the sherry cask Scotch people were obsessed with just the straight sherry cask. They're like, I just want to pour this and straight down my throat. And I was like, calm down. That literally just tastes like tannins and baking spice, but okay. But the nice thing is the port barrels, as well as the toasted bourbon barrels we used, those accentuated the rum, added more flavors, balanced out the sherry, which you can probably still notice on there, that dried fruit, the baking spice, that sherry barrel.
It's very relaxed, though. I'm getting apricots, I'm getting bananas. It's almost like a banana bread on it, and it's kind of refreshing.
I called that one after we made it dessert in a glass.
It really is.
There's no additives in that rum. Right. I tell people there's no additives in the rum except what was in the barrel. Right. So clearly you've got sherry influence, you've got port influence. And the interesting thing that I'm not sure they fully appreciate in a toasted barrel, but we we have the luxury of having the exact same rum go into a lot of different types of barrels, and I can kind of tell you exactly what a barrel does to a rum. Brown-Forman's toasted barrels add cream vanilla to everything. So, which maybe isn't as apparent when you drink a 1910 or a Woodford Double Oak because they have such other strong flavors, right, coming into play. But like, if I put a very light-bodied rum into one of those, it always comes out with like this creamy vanilla mid-palate. So that really helped balance out the sherry in the blend.
It does. It's there. And until you mentioned the Double Oak, which is to me just pancakes in a bottle. Like now that's coming because now I'm looking for it. Yeah, but it sits behind just a ton of vanilla.
And what's interesting with Double Oak barrels is, because it's a non-charred barrel, the first 3 to 6 months, light charred.
It's light charred, yeah.
The first 3 to 6 months, it picks up like it's all like it becomes very mentholy. It gets very almost like evergreen. It's what it does with rum over the first 3 to 6 months is actually pretty uncomfortable. And you have to let it ride another, it has to go in a toasted barrel. It has to go over 12 months to really hit the right cream notes. And that's something that we've learned by mistake at times.
Well, and you guys hitchhikers guide to the galaxy. Don't panic.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you're halfway through some barrel you're aging in, you just got to say, well, let's just fucking visit it again in 6 months or a year because right now it's pretty garbage, right?
Yeah.
The thing we always hang our hat on is we try to only use really high quality barrels, right? And so we kind of have faith that if we do our homework up front and use really high quality barrels, it will generally produce really high quality rum. We've had a few go bad, but sometimes, that first 3 or 6 months, you just absolutely think you ruined something. It'll take a year or 2 years to balance out in a barrel. So.
I have so many more questions with that, but I'm not going to get into it right now because I'm pretty sure like my science side of my brain really wants to know more about the maturation process of rum.
I can give you an hour-long spiel on different types of barrels and the types of flavors. Yeah. Turner usually goes to sleep about 5 minutes in.
We could get real nerdy on this.
That one is probably that. We have another esoteric SKU that we don't have to talk about right now called Fortuitous Union, but that El Salvador and Fortuitous Union, those are the two cigar crowd's favorites.
Really?
They love it.
I can see that based off of what I'm getting off of just the El Salvador right now. I could match this almost with anything I have currently in my cigar collection.
I'll have to seek that one out.
For me, that El Salvador, have you ever had the rum caramel bread pudding?
Yes.
So good.
I'm too lazy to make bread pudding, so let's be up front, right? But I was like, if I ever made bread pudding, the rum sauce I would use that El Salvador.
I was actually thinking of the Heart of Gold.
Well, the Heart of Gold, that's the economical choice for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just based off the flavor for the Heart of Gold, I think they would open up that bread pudding a little bit more. And then you caramel. Oh God, now I'm just fat and need to eat more. Or go on another run.
Or drink.
Just run more and drink more. That's
you balance it out somewhere in there. Yeah. It's math. Well, got a couple questions left because I know we're kind of rounding out to that hour, but we ask a lot of obviously spirit related questions. Obviously in our whiskey ones, we do a lot of bourbon and Scotch questions, but we do like to get off of this a little bit. We ask kind of a themed question to everybody that jumps onto the show about a squirrel. It could be anything. It's just a random question we'll just throw out there about a squirrel. So Adrian, did you want to take this one away?
I can ask the question.
You get the squirrel question today.
Yeah, I get the squirrel question today. If you have to name a bottle with a squirrel theme, what is it called?
We're coming up with a brand with a squirrel theme,
or even just just an expression if you want.
There you go, an expression.
I've got some ideas. I'll let Turner go first.
I'm trying to put them all together.
Well, I could go silver squirrel because that would be pretty badass to have like a squirrel
That's
jumping
actually-
across a label in Boston
actually-
silver. That would be pretty
Right.
badass. I don't know what it would be, right?
No, but I like
maybe
that.
like
I like that name.
like an almond liqueur or something like that. Silver squirrel. If I was just being profane and wanted people to buy the bottle, I'd have something like hidden nuts or something.
I knew. I
right?
was so
Yeah.
hoping you'd go with something like
I was
that.
going to avoid that. I wasn't going to touch it.
What, the hidden nuts or the bottle?
Just
Yeah.
the
And if I made like
the
a
nuts
I don't-
reference.
I don't know, some kind of like chili pepper infused something, I would just call it 2 squirrels in a wool sock and just leave it at that.
Okay, so now we
Anyone?
need these.
Anyone? You guys aren't familiar with
Oh,
that?
no, I
Okay.
got it. Yeah. That's,
Yeah. You guys haven't heard that? So that was, I'm from Western Kentucky. It was always, it's hotter than 2 squirrels fucking in a wool sock.
Yep.
Right? Yeah.
Okay, we need that bottle now. I mean,
Yeah.
at some point, because I would buy that on label in name alone, which I have done many times. And
I'd probably do it as a math equation too. I would just literally
Yeah.
have 2 squirrels and then a wool
Yeah.
sock and then a line.
Yeah.
And then, yeah.
You just have people staring at the bottle like, what does this mean?
Yeah.
Like somebody from Kentucky walks by and I'm like, I know what that means.
Chili infused whiskey.
That's awesome.
What about you, Turner? Do you have an answer to this?
Yeah, I would like to take like a New York rye and blend it with like maybe a high corn Kentucky bourbon and just call it like 2 fighting squirrels or squirrel fight. And just because I want 2 squirrels on a label like this with those little puffy tails out, I think that'd be fun.
Boxing gloves.
Yeah,
That's not a bad
Yep.
idea.
make the boxing gloves colored. So like, yeah, and then
I think
all
it's got to
you
be
have
one of
is-
those OG ones where they both have cigars. too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tapper and cigars are just a pipe. Little monocle, maybe. Now we're getting crazy with it.
So let's say I wanted to buy some Rolling Fork rum. Where would I do that?
Okay, let's do the plug. Please just go to our website, rollingforkrum.com. The 3 of a couple of the expressions, they've tried 3 expressions today that are available.
Hold on, they haven't tried the
But we
10-year
haven't tried the
Barbados
one-
yet.
Yeah, which is
You guys got to try the Barbados.
favorite.
That
I-
one was my favorite. That one was by and large my favorite.
We wanted to launch a website that we could sell on for 2 reasons. 1, because we need money, but 2, we can also control what we release there. Whereas if you work through a distributor, they just come and pick and choose. And so our first intention with launching our e-commerce was to give a full variety of expressions that start to encompass the full gamut of what is out there in rum. And so currently on our website, we have Jamaican rums. We have Guyanese rums. I think it's probably out. We had a Brazil rum. I think it's sold out also. We had a Barbadian rum. So in our first attempt at the website, we launched over 4 different countries of varietals of rum, which is very important to what Jordan and I's mission is. Just get the American consumer to see the depth and breadth that exists in the rum world. Rollingforkrum.com, everybody.
But to answer y'all's question, the 10-year Barbados is on there too. And that one was 2 years in a toasted bourbon barrel from Brown Foreman. So pretty interesting rum.
Oh, it's phenomenal.
It would be, so, we've done a few like Elijah Craig barrel proof barrels or these Woodford Double Oak barrels, things like that. Very bourbon drinker centric. Right. It adds a layer of what you expect out of, I call it the old man sipping whiskey bourbon, right? Usually like that Elijah Craig factor where it's like, yep, this is what I want to drink when I sit on my porch and yell at kids.
Yeah.
Yep. So I think what those barrels do to the Barbados rum we source from Foursquare is they add like a layer of that to a relatively, lighter bodied rum.
Awesome.
Well, whatever you guys are doing with all your rums, thank you for doing it. It's absolutely phenomenal. And people really
appreciate
do
it,
need to
yeah.
go out there and buy it.
Yeah.
Turner's family would appreciate it if you buy it too.
My
It'll
2
help his
children
kids,
sure
yeah.
would.
That's
Yep.
right. It's his children's future right there.
Yeah.
All in this glass.
Yeah.
think we got a last question here for him.
We got time for one more, I think. Yeah. So, and we typically will ask guests this, and usually we'll ask what your favorite or most memorable whiskey experience is. But we're going to go ahead and add rum to that if you want to. If it's a rum experience, we'd love to hear your best memory around that.
What? Can I go very weird right now?
Yeah, you can. Any memory you want.
It's not even rum. It's actually Armagnac. We actually started sourcing Armagnac last year. So we bring it in by the cask from France. We also source Calvados from France. The impetus for that was we need barrels to put rum in. When you get down to it, it's like, well, I could buy an empty barrel or I could buy a full barrel. So we took the road stupidly traveled and bought full barrels. But I will say this, Armagnac is a very fascinating spirit and it's a very fascinating area of France. And you go there and you meet these producers who are in their 70s or 80s who've grown these vineyards. It's just an incredible, it's almost what bourbon wants to be in terms of authenticity and craftsmanship. Mm-hmm. It's what they trot out front of these large industrial whiskey plants here, right? Where you go in and there's 10 36-inch column stills, and you're like, yeah, there's no authenticity or craftsmanship left to this. It's good, but it's an industrial process. If you go to the smaller jurisdictions like Armagnac or Calvados or some of the jurisdictions of rum, there is still that level of craftsmanship and authenticity. And so 2 years ago, we went to Armagnac during distilling season. And I was blown away by, think about doing something. We've been doing it this way for 400 years, longer than the United States has existed. They've been using a wood-fired, continuous still to distill Armagnac. And yes, they still chop firewood for it, which was how are you guys not all dead of a heart attack? Right? Because you got to chop a lot of firewood to run a still 24/7 for 3 weeks. So it was just very fascinating, coming from here. And as much as I love bourbon and I love Kentucky, those are industrial processes. Mm-hmm. It's not like there's a guy out back chopping firewood to keep the still running, Right. These are still very harvest driven. The grapes are brought in, the wine is made, and the Armagnac is made, and that's it for the year. Whereas here it's corn is always coming in, wheat is always coming in, rye is always coming in from everywhere in the world, and we're making bourbon with it. It's they grow the grapes, they make the wine, they distill it into Armagnac, they put it in their cellar, and they wait 20, 30, 40 years. It's just it's a mind-blowing experience, one I would recommend to anyone.
And it's why... And I'm sure there'll be people yelling at their screens why it's hard to apply the term terroir to whiskey. When you compare it to something like what they've been doing in wine for, like you said, 400 plus years in some of these places, and then you try to do it with whiskey, it's not all. Some maybe a select few distilleries in Scotland could maybe take that on, but even
some of the farm to glass places maybe, but here's so for example in Gascony region, a lot of the Armagnac producers use Gascon oak casks, so literally the barrels are from that region as well. So the grapes are grown there, everything is from that region. If there was someone in Kentucky that was growing all their own grain to make their whiskey, running their own still, and then making their own barrels, or having someone locally source white oak from the Kentucky region, that would be an approximation. And then, the discussion of terroir, I think, would be valid. Absolutely. Right? That is a very Kentucky product, but that's not the way we make bourbon.
No, absolutely. That was an awesome answer, though, by the way. I was not expecting Armagnac. Yeah. That's really cool.
It's mind-blowing to see. That's really cool. I highly recommend everyone go. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Nobody, don't go.
New Bourbon with Friends trip.
Yeah, to Armagnac. Turner, what about you? Favorite experience? It could be any spirit at this point. We went to Armagnac, so.
It's one time. This is when Jordan was living on the West Coast and I was on the East Coast, and we would order samples and then divide samples and then figure stuff out. And then one time he's like, "You're not going to get a sample of this, but we're going to buy a barrel of rum from Guadeloupe, and it's 22 years old, and it's gonna. We actually don't have the money to buy it. We're gonna buy 2 of them. And I was like, not again. We always act in a method of business where we never have money. And so I started to get very stressed out. And this is this was the distillery that did it predominantly does cane juice. But this is before that they did cane, when they actually ran a little bit of molasses. And
so what Turner's not saying as well is this is right at the beginning of COVID. So there's much uncertainty in the world, and I'm just like, fuck it, let's buy some expensive rum. And Turner's like freaking out. Everyone else in the world's like panicking, and I'm just like, buy more rum. So yeah,
not only did I not get to try what was going to be the most expensive purchase that we had ever made at that point, so I don't get to try it, but I do have to pay for it with money we don't have. And it was, if you like dusty, funky, not too funky, but musky, it's not overly hot. It's not part of the craze that we have in American whiskey where everything needs to be 136 proof and jet fuel.
Yeah.
And something that, if you were to open it and allow it to oxygize a little bit, it's going to change flavors every 45 minutes. That one really, really blew my mind away. What Jordan said about the Armagnac, I mean, we are tasting through cellars from the 70s and 80s. That is really mind-blowing. The first time we went to visit, our host had a bottle of his family's Armagnac from
1952. There was you're thinking the 1800s one, yeah.
Yeah, from 1800s.
Yeah.
That's wild.
That wasn't pine sol and didn't suck and wasn't completely overly oaked or ruined. So the thing that I love to drink is what is going to surprise me. And what is fun about being at this space is you only get surprised by wrapping your arms around the community that you can grow within and having friends.
I feel like that should be a Hallmark card right there.
That's what I'm going for.
Yeah, that was
good,
that
man.
was great.
That was emotional.
Jesus.
I think we just found the title for our episode.
Yeah.
And when you get to be around friends, it's the thing that they show you, whether it's new make, whether it's well-aged, whether it's something from but whatever it is, when someone gets to hand you a glass and they tell you a little bit about what's in that glass, it's that moment you guys share that make these spirits enjoyable.
I will say what Turner said is very apt for, like, when you guys asked how do we get into rum, it was that we were looking for something different and surprising.
Yeah.
Right. So like you drink so much amazing spirits, right? That like what you actually seek out are the things you've never had. So for us, rum was definitely one in the US that you just couldn't get. You'd never had, like well-aged rum, and then Armagnac and Calvados as well. I would say Japanese whiskey is an amazing frontier as well. So that's kind of what we view our mission as, is not necessarily to bring in rum or to bring in one thing. It's to bring in the things we find interesting, which can be a terrible business model, by the way. We would be better off just bottling MGP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it doesn't keep it interesting. So
no, like keep us engaged. It's got to be something that we truly enjoy and find different. So yeah.
Well, like I said, gentlemen, thank you guys so much for coming on.
Thank you.
I would hate to say I have to thank our sponsor, 10th Mountain Whiskey. You can find them on all social media platforms in 40 different states and in 26 different states distributed throughout. So to ship to, go to 10thwhiskey.com and enjoy some of their products. But more importantly, go to Rolling Forks website. Make sure you buy that rum and support Turner's kids for college.
Yeah.
And
Rollingforkrum.com.
Yes.
And Jordan's puppies. We don't have a picture of his puppies, but people love dogs.
I have dogs with very high expectations for lifestyle. So it's much appreciated.
Exactly.
All right.
Perfect, folks.
All for the
thank
puppies.
you guys so much.
All right, thanks a lot for having
guys,
us. We
thank you so
appreciate
much.
it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
again.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Remember, everybody,
Thank you all.
a bourbon with friends can change the world, or
A rum.
A rum. Have a good night or day.
See ya.
Cheers, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Yeah.
That's it for this episode of Bourbon with Friends. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. While you're at it, leave us a review to make it easier for others to find the show. You can also check us out on Instagram at BWF Podcast. Thanks for listening.